Hello everyone, welcome to Amy's Bookshelf. Welcome to another Jane Austen video. I feel like every year I put out a Jane Austen character video, and this is the one I've been wanting to do. Now, this one is about my favorite Jane Austen work, which happens to be Lady Susan, if you didn't realize from the title. So, Lady Susan, I want to put out my case for her being the most scandalous woman in all of Jane Austen's work. From all of her crazy, not accidents, but incidents that she has with people and the way that we perceive her, she is, in my opinion, the most scandalous woman of them all. So I hope that you will hear my argument, share your thoughts if you agree, disagree, or if you have thoughts on other women who might also fit into that category. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let's get into why I think Lady Susan is scandalous. Let's start off with a definition so we know what we're going off of. So a scandal is an action or event that is morally or legally wrong and causing great or general outrage. It is also rumors or malicious gossip about scandalous events. So we have a few things here that Mrs. Vernon, lovely Lady Susan, does. She is not a very good person when it comes to how she talks about others. We can see this very quickly when she talks about her daughter Frederica and how she disowns her practically, and how she says she's so dumb and so stupid, and oh, the poor girl, and it's just ridiculous how poorly she treats her own daughter, her own flesh and blood. She also views her daughter as, oh, by the way, this is going to be spoiler heavy, just saying. So she also treats her daughter as her own competition in regards to certain people. So Reginald de Courcy is her her prize that she's going for. And her daughter is her competition, which is ridiculous to think about. She treats people so horribly, but in this way of writing, in Jane Austen's way of writing in letters, which I know is a theme or style of writing at the time, but in this way, we can see how she turns on the charm and talks badly about certain people to others, and how she also is very open and honest with her friend Alicia. So you see a true side of her, and you also see the fake side of her as well. Now, a lot of people will say Jane Austen has created this character that is kind of, I feel like sometimes people say she's one note, and I'm like, she is a villainess and an anti-hero, and she's a hero in some ways. She's fighting the society, but she is not without her flaws. Now, I will link the Audible great course that I listened to, where it talked a lot about this, and I really enjoyed, what's her name? The presenter's thoughts on this, but she said that if Lady Susan was a man, we would respect her and maybe fear her more than hate her because of what their actions are. So it's just interesting that gender plays a role in how we view Lady Susan. Now, Lady Susan has a few events that definitely go against her. The first of which we learned at the very, very beginning, is that she is having a scandalous relationship with her friend's husband, or acquaintance's husband, whom she is staying with. Now, it comes out later that they are having an affair, and if you look at it that way, she's having an affair in the man's home with his wife living there, and she has been a widow for 3 months. I'll correct myself, 4 months. Sorry, I knew I was close. So she's been a widow for 4 months, and she's already having an affair with a married man in his home where she's staying. Talk about scandal, right? So she is doing all of this. Meanwhile, while she's there, she is seducing her lover's sister's boyfriend. She's into seducing Sir James to be in love with her daughter. Just think about it for a minute. If your mom or if your dad seduced someone to marry you, how would you feel? Because that's what Lady Susan does. She seduces Sir James, and she says, oh, Frederica's this and Frederica's that, and he's in love with Frederica via Lady Susan, and he proposes to her, and it's just like, well, clearly this man's not the brightest bulb in the box, right? Or not the the sharpest tool. There we go. However, Lady Susan does this. I just can't even imagine if my mom seduced someone for me to marry. Ew. Like, ew. It's just not okay. And that's what Lady Susan does. And I feel like that is scandalous behavior in and of itself. Never minding the fact that she ends up married to the guy, but she seduces for her daughter. I know. Don't worry. I get it. She also uses and abuses people frequently. So she takes it upon herself to visit her brother-in-law, who she's never visited. She's never met his wife outside of their wedding, I believe was what was said. And she invites herself over for Christmas just because she doesn't have any place to stay and she's getting found out. So she just runs to them and uses them senselessly. And while there, she decides to take Reginald de Courcy's dislike for her and hatred for her and turn that against him and make him fall in love with her. Not for the purpose of being in love, but for the purpose of using him and controlling him and manipulating him. She does this with every man she meets. Every man. She does it with Manwaring. She does it with her brother-in-law. She does it with Sir James. Every single person, every single man she meets is only something to be used and treated like a toy and then thrown away when you're done. That is how she views men. She tells her friend Mrs. Johnson that Mrs. Johnson chose poorly when getting married because she chose a man who was too old to be influenced and too young to die. And clearly that's how Lady Susan views marriage. She views it as a system to get money, whether it be to manipulate a husband or to get him to die and leave you all his money. This is how she views marriage. She does not view it as a love relationship or as something to grow together, to build a family. It is genuinely just to have money and to marry the richest one she can. She is also said to be a lot younger looking than she actually is, but the fact that she is a poor widow who is already in the center of scandal and manages to escape to the countryside speaks volumes for her trickery and how good she is, but she does not escape the scandal. It is obvious to many people that Lady Susan is unfair to her daughter. She is unfair to the people around her, but in person, she appears so charming and sweet, and yet her words take away from her actions. She says that she longs and wishes to be with Frederica, but she can't afford it and she must go to school. Meanwhile, she berates her when she returns or runs away from the school because she does not want to be there anymore. And she is terrified of her mother, which proves in of itself that their relationship is not healthy and not loving and not a good solid one that you could believe Lady Susan's word on. You can also read in certain letters how people perceive her and how they are changed, or how they start to see her true colors, or they go from true colors to her charm. She can turn it on like that. She is a genius at charm. But I think it's interesting to note that there are some missing letters in the book, and those letters are to Manwaring himself. We know that she sends letters to Manwaring, and Manwaring sends letters to her, but we don't see those letters. And I feel like they'd be very scandalous if we ever did get to see them because of the events that they get caught in when Lady Susan is visiting her friend, Mrs. Johnson. So it is not a clean reputation time, shall we say. I know that a lot of the societal norms were to not marry within a year because they wanted to make sure that any child born from that new marriage would be that father's child, not the previous husband's. And she marries within a year. There is no talk of her being pregnant at the end of the book. I personally love that aspect of the adaptation. But I think it's interesting to note that when she gets married, it's genuinely because she doesn't have Reginald anymore, and suddenly it's out of nowhere. And I personally believe it's because she's about to be caught in a horrible scandal. So she ends up deciding to marry the idiot, marry the fool, and then go from there and continue because she can manipulate him and control him. For goodness sake, she got him to fall in love with her daughter through her. Like, how dumb do you have to be? And it's fine. It's fine. It's just she'd picked a good one to control and manipulate. I will give her that. You might say that Lady Susan is very shallow, or it's not as complex, it's not as detailed as Jane Austen's later work, because that was part of her juvenilia. However, scientists, or I'm not sure who, but they found that the paper that she had written Lady Susan on was published, or was not published, was printed in 1805. So at the very latest, in 1805, or should I say the earliest, late 1805 was when Jane Austen was either rewriting Lady Susan or writing it for the first time. So either way, it was not an old work for her. It was not her childhood work. And I would like to think that she put a lot of complex thought into it, a lot of gender discussion and how women are. I think it's a satire. And I love the fact that it plays on people's expectations of widows and relationships. And it shows in the books, like in the letters that are there, how Lady Susan is so conniving. She's so kind and so sweet to certain people. And then you get a letter from her to Mrs. Johnson, and it is scathing, and it is just blatant and out there. And you can tell her true thoughts and that fact that she's manipulating everybody around her, or doing her best to do so. The fact that we don't have any non-letter format chapters is of interest, because it doesn't show us inside people's thoughts. So I think in some ways it's a lot more complex than her works, her main famous works, because we don't get to know what's going on inside the head of Lady Susan when she's talking to Reginald de Courcy, or we don't get to know inside of Frederica's head when she's trying desperately to get out of whatever arrangement her mother set up with Sir James. All of these things are not spoken, but they are written on paper. We have to have the social politeness and the social expectations, the specific nice language, and, very, very shallow language to describe something very complex and very deep. And I think it's a fascinating look at how culture works and how people view women who are in this time and era. I have read a book called The Real Bridgerton, which is about scandals from Jane Austen's era. And it is fascinating because so many of these men got away with doing some of the same stuff that Lady Susan does. And yet Lady Susan manages to work the system, whereas the women in the real world did not. They fell short, or they were caught and they were struck into this social expectation. And I really think Lady Susan takes the cake. I think she is conniving. I think she is mischievous. I think she is charming, and she seduces not just the men around her, but also the women into agreeing with her. She manages to trick people, and then when she's not tricking them anymore, she still doesn't let on. She is such a manipulator, and because of that, she throws herself into the center of many scandals. But the evidence of her true character comes out when she's able to get herself out of those scandals and not give up the behavior. She is by far the most scandalous woman, I think, of Jane Austen's work, and she is one of a kind. I think she is brilliant, and I would never want to meet her, but I sure love reading her, because I am just in awe of how someone could be that, I don't want to say evil, that vindictive, or that self-absorbed, but also very aware of perceptions around her. Brilliant woman, terrifying, scandalous as ever, and I think she is worth all the scandal that is thrown her way, because she puts herself in it. So as Mrs. Johnson says to Lady Susan in letter 32, facts are such horrid things. If we look at the facts, Lady Susan's pretty bad, but pretty amazing to read. Please let me know down below if you agree with me about Lady Susan, or if you think someone else is more scandalous. There are several scandalous women, I will not deny that. However, I think she's the top of the pack. Please let me know if you agree, like I said, or if you have some other points you'd like to make. I would love to hear them all down below. And also give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.